Dave, Colin, thank you both for this opportunity. I'm conscious of time, so I will try and keep it relatively brief and tight. And I'm sure everyone will be relieved to know that I won't be going into any black letter law and just discussing too many cases. So hopefully I'll be able to keep it interesting. What I did want to talk to you about was us, a little bit of my backstory, which I thought might be of interest to you, a little bit about our practice, what we do on a day-to-day basis, and lastly, how you might be able to support us in our endeavours. So in terms of me, professional life started quite a long time ago now. I read law at university and originally qualified as a barrister, but at that time with no great desire necessarily to go to the bar. And as it happens, I took a summer job, which was supposed to last for about 8 weeks or so, and to earn some money to go travelling, and ended up lasting about 2.5 years in a commercial law firm in Nottingham. And that was a firm of solicitors. And it was really that experience that led me down the solicitor path. I very much enjoyed working with other people. I enjoyed the work that they were doing. And so ultimately, I decided to cross qualify, and I was admitted as a solicitor back in 2003. Seems quite a long time ago now. And once I'd qualified, I started doing defendant professional negligence work. I was working for a variety of leading market professional indemnity insurers and quite a range of their policyholders, other solicitors, accountants, insurance brokers, barristers, surveyors, an agronomist, I think, on one occasion. So quite a mix of different professionals that I was defending. And that was very enjoyable. But I realized quite early on, and indeed throughout that experience, that while on the defendant side, we were all specialists doing nothing other than professional negligence work, on the claimant side, the experience seemed to be much more patchy. And quite often we'd come across general commercial litigators who'd never dealt with a professional negligence claim before, or perhaps had only dealt with a small number. And my impression of that was, rightly or wrongly, that we had a bit of an advantage, perhaps an unfair advantage. And I thought after claimants had already suffered a loss at the hands of one professional, it was unfortunate that they put themselves in the hands of another inexperienced professional. So I thought that there was certainly an inequality of arms and perhaps an imbalance of justice in that situation. And that led me on to wondering what it might be like to move across to the claimant side. And so back in 2017, I made the decision to transfer across. I think the expression is a gamekeeper turned poacher. But I can assure you I'm not doing anything illegal these days. It's entirely honest and above board. But I decided to join Keystone Law in 2017 and to set up a predominantly claimant practice, although I still do a fair amount of defendant work too. So it's fair to say that I have a foot in each camp. When I started off, I had no clients, I had no following, I had no reputation on the claimant side. But what I did think I had, as I've heard said before, was a unique set of skills. And I rather hoped that that would be understood and appreciated on the claimant side. And I'm pleased to be sitting here 7 years later and say that it most certainly did, and that we now have a very busy practice. During that time, I'm also proud to say that we've received a lot of recognition from the major independent legal directories who have recorded me and endorsed me as being one of the top professional negligence lawyers in the country. So given how many solicitors there are out there, that's something I am particularly proud of. But it isn't all about me. I'm pleased to say that my partner in crime is a lady called Sharon Duncan, who works very closely with me. Sharon has been with me for about 4 years now. She has an excellent professional pedigree. She was previously at DLA, Addleshaw Goddard and Squire Patton Boggs. For those of you who move around the legal circles, those firms may mean something to you. They're all very large and highly respected firms. I think DLA is now officially about the third biggest firm in the world. But Sharon's background was in banking and finance litigation. She worked for a number of major high street banks, and that involved her in quite a number of different professional negligence claims, predominantly against solicitors, surveyors, and sometimes insurance brokers. Like me, Sharon's been around the block once or twice. She's about 25 years post-qualified. So not only does she have a good grasp of the legal issues, I think it is fair to say she's got plenty of commercial acumen as well. And like me, Sharon too has been endorsed by the legal directories and particularly by the Legal 500 for her knowledge and experience of dealing with professional negligence claims. But we would be nothing without the backing of Keystone Law. I haven't talked much in the past about Keystone in our sort of short introductory sessions, but I thought this was an opportunity to tell you a little bit more about it. As I've said, Keystone was formed in 2002 by a gentleman called James Knight, and it was quite a pioneering law firm, unlike your traditional law firm, which has a pyramid structure with equity partners at the top and foot soldiers below. Keystone Law is a flatter structure and is staffed predominantly by senior solicitors, experienced solicitors. I think average PQE is something like 20 or 22 years. So clients get that experience rather than simply that introduction from an experienced solicitor only to be passed on to a junior solicitor to do the work. And Keystone, as I say, was pioneering. It was the first law firm of this kind, and it has been copied numerous times since. Over the years, it's won many awards. I think the most prestigious of those was Law Firm of the Year, which it won in 2020, and that was an award from the Lawyer magazine. It's not just professional negligence work we do. It is a full-service law firm. And I'm often amazed to see the different areas and issues that do get dealt with. I've come across colleagues who specialise in space law, as well as a number of colleagues who specialise in super yachts. So if there's anyone in the market at the moment for a super yacht, do let me know, and I can hook you up with a good lawyer. It's grown quite substantially over the time that I've been there. I think there are about 250 partner level lawyers when I joined, and we're now pushing a number of about 500. And with that, turnover at the firm has grown as well, and it's now in the order of about 100 million, which I think positions it either just in or just outside of the 50 largest firms in the UK. It's based in the city. We've got headquarters on Chancery Lane in central London, but the lawyer base is dispersed across the country. So it's fair to say that we have national coverage in that sense. So in terms of our practice and what we get up to on a day-to-day basis, typical clients for us, excuse me, tend to be established businesses, professionals, and high net worth individuals. That's not really by design, more by default, because the sort of professional negligence claims that we deal with do tend to be towards the upper end of the spectrum in value terms, and the sort of entities and individuals who require our services do tend to fall within those categories, and the ones that have suffered the larger financial losses. In terms of established businesses, they range across the sectors. There isn't a particular sector that we focus on. The professionals that we deal with, we've often acted for both as claimants and on occasions as defendants. We've acted for other barristers. We acted for quite a number of doctors. We've acted for other solicitors, as well as accountants, and more besides. And again, high net worth individuals vary. Some of those are UK based, but it's not unusual for us to act for clients abroad too. And I've said we've got national and international coverage. And that's because most of our clients are spread across the country. We have quite a few clients in London and the Southeast. And I think that's, again, not by design, but more by default. And because a lot of those clients or London is a large financial centre, and so there's a lot of commercial activity in that area, a lot of professionals, and a lot of scope for mistakes to occur. In terms of current cases, I thought I'd just give you a bit of a flavour. I'm going to keep it slightly light because there's confidentiality and I don't want to give too much away. But we still advise on a range of different cases against different professionals. I think our largest case at the moment is a construction case. That's at about 18 million, and that involves cladding issues not dissimilar from those that have been covered in the press, and involves a potential claim against an architect, a developer, and others. And fortunately, hasn't resulted like Grenfell as a result of a fire, but has raised concerns about the specification and design of cladding that was put on residential buildings, high-rise residential buildings, in one of the cities in the UK. Insurance brokers, we tend to deal with quite a lot of claims arising from fires. In those instances, businesses and homes can be devastated. Often claims are then made against an insurance policy. It's not uncommon, I'm afraid, for those insurance policies not to respond to the claim, and that can be because the broker who arranged the policy has made a mistake of some sort, whether that's placing the wrong policy or whether that is failing to advise on particular requirements of that policy, which then the policyholder hasn't complied with, and which mean that the claim is no longer covered. We deal with claims against accountants quite commonly in the tax field. We're dealing with a £6 million claim at the moment against auditors. That relates to VAT issues. Quite often, the accountants and tax type cases are prompted by HMRC investigations and HMRC assessments. And then the client, having been presented with a rather large bill from HMRC, asking questions about why it's in that situation and why it got the advice it did from its accountant, or indeed why its auditors didn't pick up on a particular issue at an earlier stage. For solicitors, we find that conveyancing often produces quite a large volume of claims, and I don't think we're alone in that. Certainly when I was on the defendant side, there were more claims arising out of property transactions than any other area of law. And we deal with commercial clients and domestic clients in this area. I think we've got one of the larger cases we've got on at the moment is about a £2 million claim in relation to issues around a lease that an investor client had purchased, believing it had certain terms, only to come to sell it a number of years later, I think about 12 years later, only to discover that it didn't have some of the terms that they thought. And as a consequence of that, it couldn't sell the lease, and there are issues over a loss of value. Lastly, again, conscious of time, surveyors. We deal with a range of claims against surveyors. We've got the usual home buyer surveys where people discover after they've purchased a property that there are various issues. We've got one case where a gentleman purchased a £9 million property only to discover later that there were issues with the roof. We've got an interesting claim on for a developer client who built residential property schemes, and they have a claim against a surveyor who was a geotechnical surveyor who was undertaking testing for a roadway, which ultimately produced the wrong results or incorrect results, and meant an entire roadway, having been laid, had to be taken up and then relaid again. So a flavour of what we do. Hopefully that explains that it's quite a niche area, but actually quite a broad church once you get into it. Lastly, in terms of how you might support us, obviously we very much welcome any introductions to clients that you may have who themselves have suffered a financial loss and are wondering whether they have grounds to pursue a justifiable professional negligence claim. Network referrals. If in your travels, talking to other people, you should come across someone who is themselves suffered a financial loss in it, or knows somebody who does and is in need of advice, we very much appreciate that referral. And then lastly, network introductions. If there are people in your network that you think may benefit from our services and who may appreciate being introduced to us, we're always happy to talk to people. And in particular, we find that boutique law firms are quite interested in sending us work if it's not an area that they want to cover. Loss assessors are people that we like to talk to. They often are in at the front end when there are fires and floods. Insurance brokers, again, are an area of people that often get wind of a claim at an early stage and find people or businesses in need. So any of those individuals or entities within your networks, say we would very much appreciate introductions to them, and hopefully that will help them help us and reflect well on you too. So that's it. Happy to provide anyone with any further information after this, Dave, if that's better time wise. Equally happy to answer any questions that anybody has. There we go.
Got some time for Q&A now. Any questions at all for Jonathan?
Jonathan, really enjoyed that. Thank you. Just interested about medical negligence claims. Is that something you tend to get involved in, or do they become sort of like the lower value? I'm asking because there could be a member of the family that we might have to start pursuing an issue.
Yes. No, good question, Max. It's a separate area from professional negligence and always has been treated on the legal side as a separate area of practice. I don't deal with medical negligence, but I do have a colleague who specialises in that area, so I could make an introduction if that would be helpful. In terms of value, yes, some of those claims can be more modest, but equally so too can a lot of professional negligence claims. And although we tend to deal with claims at the upper end of the spectrum, proportionately, that's probably more of a minority, and the vast majority of claims are at the more modest end.
No problem, thank you.
Jonathan, we really ought to get together. This is such a familiar world that you and I inhabit. You as a practitioner, me as an expert. And I've dealt with so many of the cases that you've just rattled through.
Yeah.
So don't be surprised if you get an email from me in the next hour.
Let's do that, Chris. Let's have a one-to-one.
Good.
That was my question, Jonathan. Say it's an IFA. Who do you work with as an expert witness? So you're going into an industry you're not technically au fait with. Do you work with expert witnesses? Sorry if I got the terminology wrong.
No, you're spot on, Dave. Yes, I mean, sometimes when people have a professional negligence claim, they're not sure if it was a claim that was, certainly in the legal world, if it was a solicitor that specialised in property, do I go to a property solicitor to assist with my professional negligence claim? Or do I go to a professional negligence solicitor who doesn't practice every day in property? And the answer to that is, if you've got a professional negligence claim, you want a professional negligence solicitor, and then we can bring in other expertise as we need it. I'm not an IFA, nor am I an auditor, and there's an awful lot of technical information and knowledge that is required in those areas. So we pull in expert opinion as and when required, and we'll work on experts. And it varies from matter to matter, but If it's highly technical, chances are it's more likely that we'll need some input from an expert. Sometimes that input is to advise on the reasonableness of the conduct of the professional, what we would call a liability report or a liability advice. Sometimes we don't need that, and the error that's occurred or the omission that's occurred is pretty obvious, but the issue is around quantum, and it's how you then value the loss that's occurred, and there might be a range of different losses, and you get technical issues, factual issues around the loss, and then often there are legal issues and rules about what losses you can and can't recover. So sometimes you need expert input on both liability and quantum.
Sorry, I think somebody was talking when a lady was. Who's that? Apologies.
Lisa, did I see your flash up? Did you have a question?
Oh, no, I was just saying I work a lot. Well, I have a large network of insurance brokers through my previous job, and I do quite a bit with them now. So it'd be worth having a chat about how that might work for you and if I can help. So
yes, that's
we'll
really
have a
kind.
one-to-one at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Thank you.
Right, Lisa. Any other questions?
May I please, Dave? Jonathan, really interesting presentation. I'm working with a very experienced QS just in Wakefield at the moment. Rob has built a great QS practice, but part of his personal vision is to do a lot more work in the mediation sector. I just wondered whether you would be up for an email introduction between both of you.
Yes, no, always happy to chat to people. It never ceases to amaze me where conversations can lead. Always good to talk. So yes, no, very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Jonathan, just one final question from me. A bit granular, but in terms of the process that you go through and the kind of fee structure, obviously, if you're working for large multinationals, their kind of bank balances tend to be fairly secure.
Yeah.
For the smaller claims, how does that kind of fee structure work? Is it time spent, or is it fixed fee, or is it kind of insurable, or how does it sort of work through?
Again, a great question, Richard, because funding is an issue that arises early on in these types of claims. As you can imagine, sometimes it's less of an issue if you're a very big business, but if you've suffered a very substantial loss, you're already sometimes under financial pressures, and it can be then difficult trying to resource the legal advice and experts that you need to progress a professional negligence claim. In answer to how we work, the majority of our clients do tend to pay on a private retainer basis, which means they pay us for the time we spend working on their matter at an agreed hourly rate. How much it costs to pursue and resolve that claim, and it's ultimately about a resolution, does vary enormously from case to case, and we try and give as much of a steer at the outset as we can to a client. If clients don't have the wherewithal to fund the case privately, there are options. I suppose, like everything in life and options, they come with advantages and disadvantages. Sometimes clients will have legal expenses insurance, either as a standalone cover or as part and parcel of a home insurance policy. And if the claim is relatively modest, they might want to consider using that. We wouldn't accept that as a form of funding for a variety of reasons, not least because the rates that those insurers pay, if they actually pay anything to their panel solicitors, are pretty low. And unfortunately, that means you don't often get a solicitor who's advising you. You might get something called a legal technician or a paralegal. It's pushed down to a very low level, which is fine if your washing machine breaks down or your toaster's on the blink. But if you're dealing with a professional negligence claim, you probably want more experienced advice and assistance in your corner. Other than that, no win, no fee agreements, which are pretty common in the personal injury world, are something that we get asked about a lot. Again, they come with advantages and disadvantages, and people don't always appreciate the disadvantages that they come with. I won't go into all the technicalities now, but certainly that is a potential option. And we do some work on a CFA basis, but most of our work starts off at least under a private retainer. and we're naturally selective in terms of what we would do on a CFA basis or not, because it's the no win, no fee issue that can have adverse effects on your business cash flow. So you want to be reasonably confident that you're going to be successful, and that there's a pot there out of which both the client can recover their compensation and also enough left over for you to get paid too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'll just